Hello everyone, it's the Afro Avenger with another video, and today I'm celebrating my 1-year anniversary of the Afro Avenger Music Reviews channel, with all the reviews and everything. I know it's a little late, the actual anniversary was on the 7th, and I had to work some things out with this specific video, but I'm here to bring it to you now, and I figured since this was mainly a album review channel, I decided to make a top 10 list of my all-time favorite albums. Now keep in mind, this is my opinion, this isn't like the greatest albums of all time. Maybe some you might think they are, but yeah, this is all my opinion. This is just my favorites. I thought I'd share them with you. Some might not be so much of a surprise to you, some might, but we'll see. But anyways, I'm going to cut the crap and get right to it. This is the Afro Avengers top 10 favorite albums of all time. Number 10, Stadium Arcadium by the Red Hot Chili Peppers. This, I believe, is not only one of my favorite Red Hot Chili Peppers albums, but their best album. It contains the perfect blend of their more heavier, funkier sound from their earlier albums like Freaky Styley, Uplift Mofo Party Plan, or another favorite of mine, Blood Sugar Sex Magic, but it also has a good amount of their alternative rock style they would adopt in their middle period for albums like By the Way, Californication, and One Hot Minute, and this is the style they'd be sticking with for the majority of the rest of their careers. If anyone asked me which Red Hot Chili Peppers album they should check out, it would definitely be this one, a good amount of both their main styles of music. I much prefer the Red Hot Chili Peppers' funkier sound over their lighter alternative rock sound, but I can't lie, hearing songs like Slow Cheat after a song like She's Only 18 or She Looks to Me right before Ready Made is a really good pace changer, but the flow is always consistent on this 2-disc album. My favorite tracks on this LP are Danny California, Charlie, Stadium Arcadium, Hump to Bump, She's Only 18, Slow Cheetah, Especially in Michigan, Warlocks, Desecration, Smile, Tell Me Baby, She Looks to Me, Ready Made, So Much I, and Storm in Your Teacup. A lot I know, but this is a pretty lengthy album with it being 2 discs and all. Number 9, The Dark Side of the Moon by Pink Floyd. This was actually one of the first albums I ever had in my collection, if I recall. After more recently listening to Pepper at the Gates of Dawn, I realized how much they'd changed after Syd Barrett had left, but even still this album is a pure experience. Really, it's one of those albums where you have to listen to it from beginning to end to get the entirety of it. It shaped a lot of what progressive rock would become and blazed a trail for where it would be going with this perfect blend of alternative rock and psychedelic rock. It's one of my favorites simply because it's an album that really, my mind just melts into it when I listen to it. It's really a journey of an album, and I enjoy every second of listening to it. My favorite tracks from this album are Breathe, Time, The Great Gig in the Sky, Money, Us and Them, Any Color You Like, and Eclipse. Number 8, Lotus Flower by Prince. In actuality, this is a 3-disc set with one album being Lotus Flower, another being Ample Sound, both by Prince, and one called Elixir by Prince's protege Bria Valente. However, we're only going to be focusing on the Lotus Flower disc. In all truth, this was the first time I'd ever listened to Prince. I know this is one of the more recent albums, but I heard this album before things like Controversy, Dirty Mind, 1999, or Purple Rain, after which I was hooked. As opposed to Prince's signature synth-pop-driven rhythms and melodies like on his earlier work, this album takes more of a rock approach that he would adopt on albums like Chaos and Disorder, Rave Into the Joy Fantastic, and Planet Earth. This album got me hooked on Prince, and it was because of this album that I now own the majority of his discography. My favorite tracks on this album are Boom, Forever, Colonized Mind, Feel Better, Feel Good, Feel Wonderful, Love Like Jazz, 77 Beverly Park, Wall of Berlin, and Dreamer. Number 7, Demon Days by Gorillaz. I've already talked about how much I love Gorillaz in past videos, and I've even reviewed this album already, but I have to reiterate how simply cool this record is. It blends so many different kinds of music that it's really hard to even slap a genre on it. What's really cool is that the band members are all virtual, each having their own distinct personalities. It's easy to see why they're so popular, and just the idea behind it all is pure genius. Blending hip-hop with alternative rock and electropop, this album is unique beyond imagination. My favorite tracks are Last Living Souls, Dirty Harry, Feel Good Inc., El Mañana, November Has Come, All Alone, and Dare. Number 6, Dangerous by Michael Jackson. In my honest opinion, compared to Michael's other works, specifically Thriller and Bad, this album is totally slept on. It contains so many great gems that seem so overlooked. That isn't why I love this album so much though. The reason I love this album so much is because I feel it contains the vast majority of songs that Michael wrote with a message to the world and with a purpose. Not just catchy songs to dance to or love songs. It really showed Michael's character as a human being and what he believed in, and he put it all together in amazing music that incorporated hip-hop and New Jack swing rhythms. My favorite tracks from this album are Jam, Remember the Time, Heal the World, Black or White, Will You Be There, Keep the Faith, Gone Too Soon, and of course, Dangerous. Number 5. To Pimp a Butterfly by Kendrick Lamar. Quite a recent release, this year in fact. This quickly became a favorite of mine after the first month or so. I simply couldn't put it down. I listened to it every day for months. Not only does this album incorporate incredible funk, soul, jazz, and R&B influences, but the message that Kendrick's trying to get across isn't something a whole lot of mainstream rappers are really touching on these days. Themes of Afrocentrism, coming together as a community, dealing with depression, believing and loving yourself, and so on. An incredible record and perhaps one of the best of the past decade. My favorite tracks from this album, really all of them honestly. I can listen to this album from beginning to end without getting bored of it, but if I had to pick at least 3 favorites, they would be Institutionalized, Alright, and You Ain't Gotta Lie. Number 4. Late Registration by Kanye West. This is actually my very first hip-hop album, and the album that got me into hip-hop in general. Kanye West is an extremely controversial person and is quite detested by many. However, his music is what truly speaks for him. He's not the greatest talker, but on the mic, he lets it all out perfectly over godly productions. This album, being his second, really cemented the kind of beats he'd be using for the next several years, where he incorporates the sounds of heavy 808s and soul samples, but also mixing live orchestration to the mix as opposed to just looped samples. This record is often regarded as one of the best hip-hop albums ever made, and for good reason too. I love it so much because, in my opinion, this album just has all of Kanye's best songs on it. Not to mention, it feels very story-driven, kind of like The College Dropout with all the school skits and stuff. This was the period really before Kanye blew up and was still using his classic soul samples. A really wonderful, iconic album, and one I could never get tired of. My favorite tracks on this album are Heard 'Em Say, Touch the Sky, Gold Digger, Crack Music, Roses, Diamonds from Sierra Leone, We Major, Celebration, Gone, and Late. Number 3. Are You Experienced by the Jimi Hendrix Experience. Jimi Hendrix is one of my all-time favorite artists no matter what. His guitar playing was phenomenal, and the way his music would progress and go on to influence a wide array of other talented artists in the future, and even during his time, is just incredible. With this particular album, we get a good taste of the kind of stuff Jimi and the Experience were into at the time, as their albums would eventually start to shift into more of a blues-based sound as opposed to the album's psychedelic rock sound. Why I love this album so much is because of how Jimi just flawlessly plays these blues licks over heavy hard rock sounds, and his songwriting is so horribly overlooked and deserves much more praise than it gets. Not only is Jimi able to display his heavier, earthier sound, but he also shows that he can play softer ballads with just as much precision and grace as he does his heavier songs. And even still, Jimi wasn't afraid to experiment with sounds and studio equipment, adding tinges of pure psychedelic goodness to an album filled with already fantastic music. My favorite tracks on this album are all of them, actually, but again, if I could pick 3, they would be May This Be Love, Third Stone from the Sun, and Are You Experienced. Number 2. The Beatles, aka The White Album, by The Beatles. Of course the Beatles album had to be on here, but the choice was probably something you weren't expecting. Albums such as Rubber Soul, Revolver, and especially Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band get all the praise in the world for being so influential, and I get that, but this album was something completely different. It's been said that this album, as opposed to feeling like a collaborative effort like their previous works, this album feels like a bunch of solo works compiled onto a 2-disc album, and I agree 100%. And that's exactly why I find this album so cool. It's so diverse and filled with strange but characteristic pieces of music. Each of the Beatles got a chance to kind of throw in their ideas at the time where they were all kind of stepping on each other's toes and were on the verge of breaking up. Paul had more poppy, jazzy stuff going on, while John had experimental rock and avant-garde on his end. George was doing more pure rock music, while Ringo, who only contributed a single song, was doing country. One interesting thing about this album is that it clearly displays the common misconception that everything the Beatles wrote was amazing or pure genius, because it wasn't. Ever heard Wild Honey Pie? Probably one of my all-time least favorite songs, and Revolution 9? I don't even know where to begin with that one. However, what's left is a ton of incredible tracks that would show the direction each Beatle would go in after their split. My favorite tracks from this album are While My Guitar Gently Weeps, Happiness is a Warm Gun, Martha My Dear, Blackbird, Rocky Raccoon, Julia, Your Blues, Mother Nature's Son, Helter Skelter, Long Long Long, Revolution 1, Honey Pie, and Goodnight. Number 1. Pet Sounds by the Beach Boys. I believe I've stated this on the show many times before, so those of you who remembered, this probably wasn't a huge surprise, but honestly, I can't sing this album's praises enough. I could easily have put Smile as number 1, but there's something about this album that really strikes an emotional chord with me. Maybe it's the album's theme of growing up, or longing for love, or losing your innocence early, or complicated relationships, all of which I can identify with. It's so upsetting to me to think that at the time this album came out, people didn't like it, at least people in America didn't. The UK loved this album. Even Paul McCartney says that this is his favorite album, with God Only Knows being his all-time favorite song. That goes without saying, but this album is just something I really connect with on an emotional level. The music itself is fantastic, and it all flows and gels so seamlessly. The whole concept that Brian Wilson, leader of the Beach Boys, was going for with this album was that each song on it would be great on its own. No amazing singles with fluff thrown in between, just 13 outstanding tracks. What's even sadder, though, is that Brian was pretty much alone in this effort. The record company and his fellow Beach Boys didn't think it would sell or it wouldn't be popular, and they should just stick with their old formula, singing about cars, girls, and surfing and stuff like that. But at this very moment, this album is regarded as one of the greatest albums ever created. In Rolling Stone's 500 greatest albums of all time, it's ranked at number 2, right below, you guessed it, Sgt. Pepper's. Speaking of which, this album actually pushed the Beatles to make Sgt. Pepper. It was a circle of influence, really. The Beatles made Rubber Soul, which made Brian create Pet Sounds, which made the Beatles create Sgt. Pepper, and the Beach Boys were working on Smile at the same time and wanted to beat the Beatles to the punch, but couldn't. I'm getting off track, but you get what I mean. An incredible, influential magnum opus of an album. Of course, every track on here is my favorite track, but again, if I had to pick 3, they would be Wouldn't It Be Nice, You Still Believe in Me, and God Only Knows. Well, there you have it, my top 10 favorite albums of all time. I thank you all for watching this video, and I would love to hear your opinions, maybe even your top 10 favorite albums of all time, or maybe what you guys think are the top 10 albums ever made. Anyways, I want to thank you all so much for watching this show, for subscribing, for liking, for suggesting reviews, all of that. I want to thank you all so much, and here's to another fantastic year of Afro Avenger music reviews. It's been a long trip. I've made so many changes to the show with, scripting, with recording techniques, all that stuff. It's gone through so many changes, but, we're here. I'm still trying to work things out, trying to, make things more interesting, hopefully. But anyways, I just want to thank you all so much for everything. And yeah, here's to another year. So, this is the Afro Avenger signing out. See you all in the next video.